Despite being a Democratic state, Donald Trump is going all in on the state of Minnesota. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back in with a new video, and today it is time to talk about the 2024 presidential election because everyone, the state of Minnesota is a Democratic-leaning state. This is a surprise to absolutely no one. For crying out loud, this state didn't even vote for Reagan in 1984. Yeah, you know, the year that he won every single state except Minnesota. This state has been Democrat for decades. The last time a Republican won it at the presidential level was 1972. But despite this fact, the Trump campaign really believes they can possibly win the state of Minnesota this November. Now, before I continue with today's video, I hope you enjoy these type of videos. If you do, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Again, folks, all support is greatly appreciated, and yeah. Now, I do want to be clear that just because the Trump campaign is putting time and resources into Minnesota, that doesn't mean he's gonna flip it. It's very unlikely for him to win this fall. But his campaign still believes they have a chance here. Even if it's unlikely, they believe there is a pathway to win. Donald Trump is fixated on the idea he can expand the map in a general election that's likely to be decided in 6 swing states. He has touted his rally attendance in New Jersey as evidence that he could flip the deep blue stronghold, and he has mused about winning Virginia. Now, those 2 states, I'm just gonna say he's kind of bullshitting people. Like, his campaign, I don't think really believes they have a chance in New Jersey and Virginia. Now, I think those 2 states will be closer than 2020. You could argue New Jersey might have a big swing towards the right, but I really don't think the campaign believes they can win New Jersey. Virginia, I think the only reason they're talking about Virginia is because of the down ballot races. Now, they're not absolutely must win, but if Republicans were to somehow win Spanberger's House seat and somehow flip the Senate seat there, they would have a very good night. And that's why the Trump campaign is looking at Virginia, because if they lose by even 3 to 4 points, the down ballot impact would be significant. But it's Minnesota of all places, where Trump has been obsessed for years with leveling the Democratic blue wall, and where Trump has zeroed in on flipping the upper Midwestern state. He nearly won there in 2016, coming within 2 points of Hillary Clinton, the closest of any GOP nominee since Richard Nixon, and he promised to win it in 2020. I lose Minnesota, he said that year, I'm never coming back. Well, we know what happened. You lost by around 6 to 7 points. But people forget that back in 2016, yeah, he lost by 2. That's not a landslide margin. That's a state that, you know, Clinton won, but it was a close state. And that's why I think of the states he's talking about, New Jersey, Virginia, Minnesota. Minnesota is the one that makes the most sense. It just does. Because it's a state that he barely lost in 2016, and even in 2020, it was the most Republican of these 3. But on Friday night, Trump will come back, headlining the Minnesota GOP's Lincoln Reagan dinner in St. Paul. And once again, he and his allies are boasting that the Democratic-heavy state is in play. Senior Trump advisors presented new polling data to top donors earlier this month, showing slide decks inside the Four Seasons Palm Beach that argued Minnesota and Virginia were the top 2 states where Trump could expand the map this November. And yeah, they're right. Just ignore the polling for a minute. These are the 2 states that make the most sense to expand the map with. Because what other options really exist? New Hampshire? You're not going to win that state. That state's just gone. Maine? I could see it flipping, but it's one of those states in the Northeast that could have a big swing to the right, but at the same time, it could have a big shift to the left. States like New York and New Jersey, yeah, they're going to be closer, but the chances of actually flipping them are so slim that it's not really worth it. At least Virginia has some down ballot races to campaign on. And Minnesota, at least it was within 10 in 2020, and back in 2016, it was within 3. During the presentation, campaign advisors Chris Lachiva, Susie Wiles, and pollster Tony Fabrizio flashed numbers on screen from another Trump pollster, John McLaughlin, showing President Biden and Trump tied at 40% in Minnesota and Biden up 3 percentage points in Virginia. Without independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as an option, Trump was up 5 points in Minnesota and Biden up 1 in Virginia, the advisors told donors, which is kind of strange because in 2016, the reason Trump came so close to winning Minnesota was because of the third-party vote. The third-party vote clearly benefited Trump. But oddly enough, Trump's pollsters are claiming RFK actually hurts Trump in Minnesota. Now, there could be many reasons for why that's the case. Maybe these numbers are just bullshit. They're not good. Maybe that's the case. Or, and this I think is more realistic, Biden's just doing so poorly in Minnesota that he's lost every single voter he can lose. Now, some of them might come back to him, but as of now, he can't get any lower, polling-wise. So maybe these voters that broke for RFK, maybe they are Biden 2020 voters that flipped to Trump but decided, I like RFK better. That could be the reason for why Trump is actually doing better without RFK on the ballot. That could be true. But I find it fascinating that it is the opposite of 2016. 2016, if the third-party vote share was even higher than it was, Trump would have won Minnesota. Even Republicans in Minnesota are skeptical. Minnesota is a blue state, said Michael Broadcorb, a former deputy chair of the Minnesota Republican Party. On a good day for Republicans, it can be a little bit of a Vikings purple. But neither are without hope. Trump is running ahead of Biden in swing state general election polls, and if Trump could replicate his 2016 performance when he lost the state by fewer than 45,000 votes, he could at least put a scare into Democrats, and that might be what the campaign is trying to do. Like, yeah, they're going to try to win Minnesota because it is possible. There is a pathway to win. But it is one of those states where, demographically wise, it should be a deep red state. But these voters, for whatever reason, keep voting Democrat. They just will not flip their voting habits. That's a problem for Republicans. But even with that in mind, if Republicans force Democrats to spend money here, worst case scenario, they lose, which they lost in 2020. It wouldn't change anything. But if they force Democrats to spend money here, they could waste a bunch of money that could have went towards, say, Wisconsin, say, Michigan, say, Pennsylvania. But in a best case scenario, you flip the state of Minnesota and guarantee a pathway to victory. If Trump wins Minnesota, he's winning. That's a 7-point shift from 2020. I don't see how Trump can win Minnesota but lose the election. Minnesota remains an uphill climb for any statewide Republican candidate, but President Trump has a real shot here. Former Republican Governor Tim Pawlenty told Politico he added relative levels of voter turnout, and President Trump's performance in the suburbs will decide the election here. Now, I actually disagree with this, because this theory that you win through the suburbs, I'm getting sick of it. But especially Minnesota, that doesn't make any sense. That's not the reason why Republicans lose the state. Now, granted, you can't lose St. Paul and Minneapolis by 90 points. That's a lot of votes. Those are some big cities. They vote Democrat 90-10. You can't allow that, obviously. But the reason Republicans lose is because rural voters are not deep red. They're light red. They barely vote Republican. Instead of being R plus 50, they're R plus 20. And that's why Republicans have a problem in Minnesota. That's why I say demographically, this should be a red state. There's a ton of white working class voters in the rural parts of Minnesota that still vote Democrat. If they were to vote Republican, it would still be a tough state to flip, but it would be much easier to flip. Trump made Minnesota a prime target of his during the 2020 election. Between him and then Vice President Mike Pence, the campaign visited the state 7 times in the last 3 months of the race, but he lost Minnesota by 7 points. And in the years since, it has looked even bleaker for Republicans there. It's now a trifecta state, where Democrats control the governor's office in both state legislative bodies, but that's not Trump's fault. People gotta understand, the Minnesota Republican Party is one of the most incompetent group of people you will ever meet. These people are so useless at their jobs that they think free school lunches is socialism, and that's why they gotta vote against it. Stuff like that is why Minnesota Republicans lost the state legislature in 2022. Plus, they ran some awful candidates up and down the ballot. Scott Jensen, for example, that was your pick for governor. Really. And he was not a Trump candidate. He was quite the opposite. He was a never Trump rhino that everyone said was the electable choice. He got crushed. It wasn't even close. And he's the reason Republicans lost the state legislature in 2022. The former president says a lot of things that aren't true. Democratic Governor Tim Walz told Politico, look, we're state of hockey. We know what a hat trick is. He was beaten in 2016, beaten in 2020, and he'll lose in 2024. The Republican Party out here has about $50 in the bank. There's no ground game out here. I just don't see how being in court every day and then saying you're going to win Minnesota makes that happen. And he is right that the Minnesota GOP is worthless, but screw the Minnesota Republican Party. Ignore them for a minute. They don't matter. The fact that Trump, as of now, based on polling, not just his own campaign, but private polls, public polls, every type of pollster that has polled Minnesota, shows Trump is only down by a point. That's despite the Minnesota GOP being absolute trash. That's despite the Trump campaign before now not putting much effort into Minnesota this cycle. But it appears that they're planning on putting a lot of time and effort into Minnesota. This is the long shot state. This is a state that I don't think they expect to win. But if they win it, great news. That just gives us the presidency for sure. Because if you win Minnesota, you're winning Wisconsin, you're winning Michigan. There's no way you lose in that scenario. If you lose it, whatever. You tried, but at the end of the day, you failed to flip Minnesota. But if you win it, that would be a bonus. That would be a great win. But you should not be expecting Trump to win Minnesota this year. But I think it is smart to put some time here. I'm not saying pour $500 million here, but for example, do a rally on the border with Wisconsin. You know, do a couple rallies here and there. Do a rally in Duluth, right on the border with Wisconsin. Just do stuff like that so you could technically campaign in both states. But of course, you're in Minnesota. But if you're campaigning right on the border, you could technically say you're campaigning in Wisconsin and Minnesota. It would work both ways. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the social media accounts in the description down below, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.